I was left in an emergency room screaming in agony and active labor for 7 hours, and 3 days later my baby died. Let's talk about it. Yeah, where have I been? Some stuff has happened. First of all, I want to preface it with saying I didn't know that I was pregnant. It's something called a cryptic pregnancy, and I didn't really have any symptoms, so the last 9 months was a complete shock to me. I really didn't believe that this was the thing that was possible. Turns out it is very real. The night of September 7th, 2025, just very recently, I went to the emergency room because I knew I was dying. I wish I was exaggerating, but I had something called severe preeclampsia and a raging infection, causing me to shut down and was killing my child. And none of this was helped by the fact that I didn't know any of this was going on. But I would almost take it back calling for an ambulance, simply because of what I went through when I was there, when I made it to the emergency room. I'm not an idiot. I know that emergency rooms have long waits, but not for these kinds of situations. And when you have someone screaming in pain and soiling herself for hours on end, something went wrong. And at the very end of it, when the child is dead, something went very, very, very wrong. I'm not the same person I was when I left you guys. I have a lot of anger over what happened, but I don't have enough friends in this world to talk about it anywhere else, so we're going to talk about what I went through here. I'm going to have to do it in parts because a lot happened, and I don't have the mental capacity to go through it all in one sitting. But we're going to start with the night that I went into the emergency room because that's the most important part. So the Sunday before this happened, I was at my job. I work a very labor-intensive job. I'm pretty sure a lot of you already know that. If you figured out from my outfits in previous videos where I work, it's kind of obvious to figure that out. So I worked my shift. I did truck is what we call it, and I was putting away about 8 pallets of produce that morning, and by the afternoon my water broke. I just didn't know what that was. I called my friend, who's also my coworker, to come get me because I couldn't get out of the bathroom at my job. I had gone to the bathroom and it was like Niagara Falls happened, and it was all over me and it was all over the toilet, and I ruined my jeans, and I couldn't work like that. I wasn't in any pain. I just was, oh no, I soiled myself. I can't work like this. I need to go home. Except what I didn't know is, like, I wasn't walking like a normal person anymore. I was doing this very stretched out waddle. I have the security camera footage of it. It was insane. I could not stand up straight. I was using a shopping cart to lean on as I tried to make it to the door. But at this point, I just thought I was very tired. I thought I was just achy. I thought I worked myself too hard. I was having trouble going to the bathroom the last few days, and I thought just something, I must be getting run down. So I went home. The first 24 hours after I was home, I just slept. I really felt foggy. I didn't feel like myself. I felt like I couldn't put a coherent thought together. And all I knew was I was so tired. Then something started to change in the last 24 hours before I went to the hospital. I started to think it was that I couldn't go to the restroom. Because honestly, I didn't know at the time that the contraction, the labor pains, I just felt like I was straining to use the restroom. I was taking showers. I was sitting in different chairs in the rooms that was in my house, and the pain would stop and then it would start up again. And I could not put 2 and 2 together what was happening. If you have no reason to actually believe you're pregnant, that's not the first thing you think of for the symptoms. I just thought something, bowel obstruction. I don't know. I did not think this is what was going on. Then my fiance came home. He said, "You're still in bed. You're still like this. If you're not better by morning, I'm calling an ambulance." And I just didn't believe him. I didn't believe me. I didn't believe what was happening. But about an hour later, the pain was so bad and I was so scared. I said, it's time. I need you to call an ambulance. And he did. And by the time they got there, I was already starting to forget things that were happening. The waves of consciousness were coming and going. I remember that I started out not wearing any pants because I was soiling all of them. What was the point? So the ambulance guys had to get pants on me, which was mortifying. In the ambulance, they gave me fentanyl twice because they didn't know what to do for the pain because I could not stop screaming. And they asked me if I was pregnant, and I said, I don't think so. It's all about I remember of the ambulance ride. I don't remember how I got into the emergency room, and to this day I kind of wish I didn't go. And now we've arrived at the emergency room, where the real nightmare is about to begin. So we just left off with me arriving in the waiting room. I'm back and I'm ready to talk about more. And also thank you to everyone who's being positive about this story, because I'm also sharing it on other platforms, including Facebook. And Facebook, they are ripping me apart and telling me it's my fault that this happened. So that's fine. Nobody's going to have more guilt and shame about this than I do, so you can't say anything to hurt me that I haven't already thought myself about what I went through. I'm very well aware that I should have gone to the hospital sooner, in hindsight. But if you're not in my position and you weren't in my situation, you don't understand what I was thinking. Moving on. When I got into the emergency room, I was parked closest to the doors of where you would walk in. To my other side, security offices, all the hallways that you would go down if you were being admitted. Also, the bathrooms are down there, and that's going to be important. Like I have said, I have been to this hospital before many times for family members. I also know how emergency rooms work. I know that people are seeking pain pills and all. I know how, I'm not dumb. I know how it works. I went there for help. I was in so much pain and I didn't understand what was happening, and I was dying. I didn't know that I was dying. And if any of the naysayers want to come for me for that, you can talk to the gynecologist and all the doctors that I was speaking to who told me you have no idea how close you were to death when you came in. The infection, I'm going to put the word below because I don't know how to pronounce it, chorioamniotitis. Basically, it was an infection with my amniotic fluid and my liver, and it was because of the pregnancy. So I was emitting this kind of very foul smell whenever I was soiling myself, which was happening frequently because I was left alone in the emergency room for so many hours. Someone came very soon after I was put in there to take my vitals and hook me up to like an EKG machine and check my heart. I was in sinus tachycardia, and I know that people can get that just from being my size and walking around a room, but this was extreme. Where this story starts to get uncomfortable for me is because of the fact that I know that in normal circumstances, you don't give someone who comes into the ER water and that there's going to be a wait. But I was not a normal situation. I was having contractions that were maybe 2-3 minutes apart at one point before it got worse and worse. And I would be gripping onto the wheelchair that they put me in, and I would just be bearing down and screaming. And as I'm doing that, of course, I'm soiling myself. And at one point, I remember I looked up to the other side of the room, and every other patient in the ER was on the other side of the room. Nobody could take the screaming or the smell, to be honest, that was coming from me. And I would ask for water probably every chance I got if someone came near me. There was one hospital person behind a desk that would come into the lobby, and I would ask, please, 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 can I please have some water, ice chips, something? No. Meanwhile, and not to her fault, I have not had anything to drink for 24 to 36 hours. My lips were like chapping and curling inwards because I was so dehydrated and leaking so much fluid. I think it was somewhere around 2-3 o'clock in the morning. I could not take it anymore with how thirsty I was. So in my wheelchair, I was wheeling myself down the hallway towards the vending machines. I did have my wallet with me. My fiance made sure to give me my wallet and my phone before I left. But of course the vending machines weren't working. Card, cash, nothing, just weren't working. I had 3 vending machines, none of them were working. I'm looking around to see if anyone could possibly help, nothing. 2 ladies that were nearby had water, and I said, I'm so sorry to bother you, but how did you get that water? These don't work. And they said, it's not our water. It was here before we got here. So of course, no answers. That's when I noticed right across from me was a bathroom. So I wheeled myself into the bathroom, shut the door, turned the sink on, and drank ER sink water because I was so desperate for something. And when I got back to the waiting room, I think that whole ordeal took me about an hour and a half just to move down a hallway and back and to sip some water out of a sink. And even though I'm going through all of this, I still wish that I didn't meet the first person that I met when someone finally did see me a few hours later. The way that this woman treated me while I'm screaming in pain, I just really hope she never goes through anything like that herself. It was about the same until about 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning when someone finally pulled me into a bed. This is one of the more vulnerable parts of this story. I felt the most shame at this point in time, at this moment with this person. When I told the gynecologist that got assigned to me what this person said and did, he was in shock during my second appointment that I showed up in person, because my first one was a video chat. He was in shock. He said, I didn't think you were going to show up to your appointment, honestly. And we're laughing because we're getting along really well. And I said, why? Why would you think that? What did I do to make you think that I wouldn't show up? And he said, you didn't do anything. It's what we did to you. I really didn't think you'd come in after how you were treated. So I feel better knowing that even the gynecologist thinks what this person did specifically was just beyond. Why? So at this point, it's probably about 6:30 in the morning, almost 7. And I know this because I use my chart, and it tells me that when I got seen by the first doctor and they started doing the first test, it was about 6:37 in the morning. So it's been about 7 hours. But before the doctor, I had to get changed into a gown. And that's when I met Miss See You Next Tuesday. I don't think she was a nurse, and I want to say now, the nurses were wonderful. I have nothing against nurses. When I got upstairs and had to spend a few days in the hospital, I don't think I would have gotten through it without talking to some of the nurses that I did. They were vulnerable. They shared their own stories. They told me how this wasn't my fault. And I honestly don't think I would have made it through the first 2 nights without them. So this has nothing to do with the nurses. This woman was not a nurse. I get brought to a gurney in a hallway because obviously it's an ER, it's busy, they don't have rooms. And when I get wheeled in, she tells me to get up and she wants me to change into the gown and get into the gurney. I immediately tell her through gritted teeth, because I'm still having contractions and screaming, I can't. She immediately says, well, you got yourself to the hospital, so you can get into the bed. I don't have a big backbone. It's just something that's known about me, especially if you've known me in this channel. I don't fight for myself very often. And that is something I'm trying to work on. But at this moment, I was in too much pain to even try to fight back. I just was crying. If I wasn't screaming, I was crying. I was terrified. I was alone. I didn't know what was happening, and I felt like I was dying. I remember looking at her and then begging her, ma'am, I can't. And I was standing up at the same time, and I was wearing this pair of leggings that I've had for a long time, and I do miss them because I did have to throw them out because at this point they were a biohazard. Everything was soaked. The wheelchair seat below me was covered in urine and the infection fluid, and there was nothing I could do about it. My leggings were soaked to the bone. I was dripping on the floor. She was visibly and audibly disgusted. She holds the gown in front of me, like away from her, and goes, oh, girl. She tells me verbatim, you can't be coming into the ER smelling like this. We are ladies. We have to do better than this. You have to take better care of yourself than this. I don't even remember having a reaction to her. I just cried. She points me to the bathroom on the other side of the hallway and tells me to go in there and clean myself up. And I'm telling her I need help, and she tells me that she can't. I need to take care of myself. So I go into the bathroom, and I remember just grabbing onto the sink and just bawling. I wasn't having a contraction at that moment, and my legs were shaking. I'm crouched over, can't stand up straight, obviously, at this point. And I didn't know how to clean myself up because I don't even remember thinking like a normal human at this point right now. I did my best, and I did my best to put that gown on, but I couldn't even clean my clothes up off the floor, and I could tell she was upset about that too. I got this question on Facebook, and it was a really good one. When I got put onto the bed finally, and I was laying there, I finally met the first doctor. He comes out and he talks to me for a minute, and he hears that I have abdominal pain. Finally, someone with some sense. He's the first one to jump to an ultrasound and a pelvic exam. I remember these things happening. I remember trying to explain what was going on with me for the last 48 hours. And that's when I heard them kind of whispering to each other, no, there's a full-grown baby right there. And then it was like the panic lights went off. I was brought into the CCU next door because they told me there was no time to bring me up to labor and delivery. At that point, it was too critical of a situation. So now I'm terrified, alone, and shamed and about to give birth to a baby I didn't know I was pregnant with. All right, so here we are. I'm about to give birth to a baby I didn't know I had, after almost 8 hours of being tortured by being left alone in active screaming labor in an emergency room overnight, because nobody could be bothered to check twice what was going on with me. And I definitely would just want to address a question that's being asked a lot in the previous videos, is where is my fiance? I told him not to come. We don't have a car. You can read about that in my GoFundMe. And we have cats, and I was so worried about them and him, and how is he going to get home? How is he going to get to his job the next day? I didn't even know what was wrong with me, and I was basically incoherent at that point, and all I kept saying was, stay home, stay home. And he listens to me. He wanted to be there. And as for like friends, it was almost midnight. I don't have many friends, but the ones I do have wouldn't have been able to be there in the middle of the night on a weekday. Here I am. Just went through what I did with that aide, telling me to get dressed and take care of myself when I clearly couldn't. Telling me I smell, telling me I need to take better care of myself and I can't come into the ER smelling like this. At this point, I'm ready to just give up, mentally and physically. They had me laying back on the stretcher, and I mean like flat on my back, no pillow behind my head. And the pain I felt in my back, the pain I felt in my legs and my abdomen, it just felt like nobody cared. Nobody was listening to me. At one point, my gynecologist asked, when I was retelling him this story, he said, do you think it has anything to do with the fact that you're overweight? And I said, yes, absolutely. Especially with the way that that one lady treated me. Can I fully explain why I felt that way? No, but I have been treated like this for a long time, since I started putting weight on like 15 years ago. You get treated differently when you're heavy, and that's just a fact. I'm not here to argue that with anybody who thinks differently. So finally, they're paying me attention. They do the ultrasound, they do the pelvic exam, and they discover, as they whisper to each other, there's a baby. There's a big baby. There was no time, according to them, to move me to labor and delivery at that point. Once they figured out what was happening, it was go time. I was moved next door into the CCU and surrounded by quite a team of people, and they put me into the position to give birth. Mind you, I've had maybe 30 seconds to wrap my own in and out of consciousness brain around this fact that I'm about to give birth to a baby. I also know at the same time, I can't handle being a mother. It was never my plan. It was never me and my fiance's plan to be parents. I was on birth control. I went off of it with a plan to go on to a different one, and I got pregnant in that interim very quickly. It was less than a month. Again, no one will be able to blame me more than I blame myself for any of this happening, so don't be mistaken about that. The one awkward thing I remember is there was this older gentleman doctor who was just had his arms folded, and he was just intently staring between my legs the entire time. Come to find out, he was paying attention to the baby's health. My baby was blue when he came out. He had an APGAR score of 1, 4, and 8, and I don't really know too much about APGAR scores other than knowing that 1 means he was severe in like the first minute of it being born, and the numbers going better as they recheck after like I think 5 and 10 minutes. Correct me if I'm wrong. But the point is he was severe. The pain that I went through in this childbirth, I still can't sleep at night. I take kind of micro naps throughout my days, but if I sleep anything longer than 2 or 3 hours, I start to have nightmares about what I went through. I'll put it to you this way in terms of natural childbirth pain, and especially in the situation that I was in. It was so painful that in that moment, if I had government secrets, I'd talk. I tore. I had to have surgery later in the week for that because I refused to have surgery the first day, and I'll get into that later why. And to have this team of people around you saying you by name, telling you, Rachel, keep pushing, you gotta keep pushing, you gotta keep going, and you feel like you can't even breathe, you can't lean up enough to do the pushing, then suddenly it's over. Everything that I've been feeling for the last few days, all the pain, the way it's been snowballing like a huge avalanche, the neglect and the fear and the exhaustion, all of a sudden it just stops. The pain and the pressure I felt in my abdomen was gone, and I was told I have a son. He was 40 weeks and 3 days completely full term, and I didn't have a single clue the entire last year. The main reason I'm telling this story is because if this is something that I could help another woman with, I want to. I'm going to get through the shame of this story hopefully to get through to somebody to go see a doctor themselves. And I wish the story stopped here, but the week was just an insane week, and we're going to keep going with it. Next video, I'll tell you guys what happened when I finally made it upstairs after the giving birth. So I just gave birth to a son I didn't know I was pregnant with. Let's keep going. Before we do, there seems to be a few people. I just delete the comments when someone's negative because this is my page and I don't need to see your shit. But there was one person who said, BS, I've been a labor and delivery nurse for 25 years and we see people immediately. I'm going to provide some receipts for you guys from my MyChart because I don't know why people think this is something that gets lied about. I mean, obviously I'm not naive, I know people lie, but I'm just going to post some receipts. First picture should show you it was 11:30 at night when they took the EKG. The next time I was seen was 6:30 in the morning. They didn't do an ultrasound or a abdominal exam until 6:30 in the morning. This is the in order of when I got seen test results wise. The scanned lab report was also a written form that said I had prolonged ruptured membranes and the Corias something infection. And if you want more proof, keep asking because I have it all in my MyChart. It's all there in black and white. Okay, now that we got that out of the way. The other question I keep getting is, have you contacted a lawyer? Yes, several. I get a lot of rejections, mostly them saying it's not that you don't have a case, it's just not worth our time and resources. That doesn't mean I'm giving up. There's actually been some really nice people on here who have been helping me meet with other types of lawyers. So thank you guys. After he was born, I remember telling a nurse about how I knew I couldn't be a mom and that I was going to need to put him up for adoption. At this point in time, I didn't know how sick he was. So my only thought was I wanted to get him taken care of and I needed the hospital to know that I could not be his mother. It doesn't mean I didn't care and I wasn't in excruciating agony over what was going on, but I needed it to be very clear that I was not going to be his permanent guardian. So I didn't see him after he was born. They had to take him away pretty quickly. And I think adrenaline-wise, my body kind of gave up after that. I don't remember how I got up into my labor and delivery room when I did get upstairs. I more remember waking up at night. I was on a magnesium drip, and the nurses told me that I pretty much slept the entire day. And this really was when the adrenaline started to come down, and I started to sit with what just happened. And one of the first things I did was I was incredibly apologetic. After giving birth, I wasn't wearing underwear, and I would have to go to the bathroom, and I would have accidents. I was leaking. And after how I got treated downstairs, I remember just crying to the nurses and apologizing because there would be a mess on the floor. And one of the nurses finally said, like, honey, this is not a big deal. We're used to this. You just gave birth. And I told her what the lady did downstairs, and that kicked off a series of, I'm sorry, what happened to you? And they started to explain to me, especially some of these nurses, that if they were around and if labor and delivery was there, they would have recognized the smell. They wouldn't have shamed me for it. They would have recognized that something was severely wrong. And they would have been able to jump into action a lot sooner than anyone else. I do not have an answer for why they left me alone for as long as they did. I came in by ambulance. I was telling them it was abdominal pain. I'm screaming in an ER for hours and I was ignored. They came and told me that I was going to need surgery, and the first day I just couldn't do it. They needed to repair the fact that I tore. He was 8 pounds and 9 ounces. He was a big boy. I said I just needed a day. I needed a day with my autonomy. After everything that happened, I just needed to feel like I had some form of control. And I asked a couple times, but I was still pretty out of it, but nobody really had any information on my son yet. So the next afternoon, I had my surgery. Still hadn't heard anything about my son. They moved me to an oxygen, like a room where they pay attention to it, because I wasn't doing good after surgery. When I woke up, I was having some issues after the anesthesia, so they needed to monitor my oxygen. That's when I met the doctor who came into the room, and very somber. I could tell just from the way he was acting that something wasn't going to be good. And that's when he started to tell me that my son was failing. He hadn't got enough oxygen. They think he swallowed some of the fluid from the infection. So here I am grappling with the fact that I just had this baby that I didn't know I was going to have, and now they're turning around and telling me that he is dying. And I'm honestly not sure how much more I can take at this point. Alright, so I'm post-op for my surgery. I'm in the oxygen monitoring room, and I'm meeting the doctor that's taking care of my son. Right before the doctor showed up, my fiance was there. He had just left maybe like 10 minutes before the doctor entered the room. And at one point I told him how they were calling our son baby last name, because obviously I'm not going to tell you guys my last name. And I was I didn't like him not having a name and just being called baby last name. I wasn't in a mental state where I could think of a name that was going to be this child's name forever. I realized in that moment just like how important it is to pick a person's name, and I was coming up blank. So I turned to my fiance and I said, I don't know what to name him. What do you think? He didn't even hesitate. It just bleh, right out of his mouth. Alfred. And we nicknamed him Alfie between the two of us, but Alfred to the world. And I don't want Alfred's death to have been for nothing, so there's a lot of reasons why I am choosing to talk about this here, and that's one of the big ones. Is I want Alfred to be known that I did have a child. He did live for 3 days, and he left an impact. So this is the first time I'm meeting his doctor, and he's not happy at all. He's like me right now. You can tell he doesn't have good news to bring me. And that's when I start hearing about everything that he's going through, and in my easiest summation, it was his heart and his lungs and his brain for the most part. They weren't getting enough oxygen. They didn't get enough oxygen during delivery. They weren't seeing a lot of brain activity, and they weren't sure what kind of mental deficits he would have had. They were emphasizing that a lot, that they don't know what his quality of life was going to have been. He was very kind. He told me that they were doing like literally everything possible. They brought up ECMO because they wanted to see if he was a candidate, but he was already convinced that he wasn't because of his situation and how young he was. I will tell you ahead of time now that no, he wasn't a candidate. He was rejected. But they were trying a lot of medications and they were trying a lot of therapies to just get his body to work. He discussed with me the decisions that they might have to come to me with. And all the while I'm thinking, I've been here before. The mother that I don't speak to anymore, the one who abused me my whole life, she had a series of surgeries in 2016, and it was sudden, and I had to make life or death decisions. So in my head, I'm like, I've been here before. I was trying to familiarize myself with it, like it's something normal and not, I just gave birth to a baby and now he's dying and I have to make decisions. So the realness of this was just settling into my chest while he was talking. I was really starting to wonder what kind of nightmare I was in. Did I die in my bedroom? It's a lot to wrap your brain around. He told me he would stay with him through the night. He was the one on shift, and before he left, I told him that we named him Alfred. And it was nice. It was nice to see him smile, and he said that they love when the babies have names and they can give them names so they can talk to them easier. So it made me feel good knowing that they were up there giving him his name for me. I have to keep taking more and more breaks this video because this is a lot harder to get through talking, so just don't mind the cuts. They're a little bit rougher, this video. Meanwhile, I bounce back by the end of that night from the oxygen issue, and I get moved back into my room that I'm in for the rest of the week. I still couldn't sleep. After the magnesium drip, I was up. That was the only day I could sleep. I would take like a nap for about 45 minutes and then I was just up. Like my body just was telling me like instinctually, like you need to be up. And that next morning, I got to meet my son. This is Alfred. I got to hold his hand. He looked at me once. And this was the only day that his eyes were open. He started to get sensitive to the light as his issues progressed. And at this point in the hospital, I'm trying to rest and he's trying to rest. He's trying to get better. And meanwhile, I'm trying to find him parents. I'd been talking to an adoption agency when my estranged sister enters the story. So here I am meeting my son for the first time. He was wonderful, and I really didn't want to leave the room. I had to because I didn't feel good myself, and it was hard to not be in their way. There was a lot of people around him. He had a big team. I would talk to him though and tell him how hard I was trying to find him parents, find him a family that could take care of him. Still letting him know that his dad and I love him. It's just, we're not good parents. And honestly, I need people to understand that there's nothing wrong with recognizing within yourself that you're not a mother. And it doesn't mean, I know this now for sure, that you wouldn't love your kid. Because I only met that little boy for 3 days and he is all I think about every day since. I just know myself. My fiance knows himself. We have a hard enough time when our cats are meowing for no reason. We both grew up with terrible backgrounds with our own families. We didn't learn healthy coping mechanisms. We're learning that together now for the last almost 6 years together. Financially, I mean, I literally, I have a GoFundMe to help pay for my own medical bills right now, let alone how I was going to be able to take care of a child. I can't imagine not being able to make sure that he has diapers or is able to go to a doctor's appointment when these are things I couldn't do for myself before he was born. I didn't go to doctors bigly in part because of financial problems. Go to a doctor's appointment or eat. Those are the kinds of questions I was grappling with. I can't do that to an unborn child who I didn't know was coming and is completely innocent in this world and deserves the best chance he has. So I wanted to find him parents. At the same time, I mentioned that I didn't have many friends. I don't have family of my own. So I was going through a lot of this by myself and with like the 3 people that really knew what was going on with me. One of those people that I reached out to was my very, very, very estranged sister. She and I grew up together with our mother, who was awful. She ducked out 20 years ago, and I've rarely seen her since. In the last year, I talked to her maybe twice, and that was the most I think we have spoken in 10 years. So in my little grief, I sent her a message saying, hey, this is what happened. Right before they took me in for surgery, the phone in my hospital room started to blow up. I couldn't get out of the bed, so I couldn't reach the phone. So I asked the nurses who were coming to get me for surgery, can you please find out why that phone is ringing? It was my sister. She tracked me down and she was very animated asking, do you want me to come there? Do you want me to come there? She lives a few states away from me. I was so alone, I said yes. She also told me at the same time to stop talking to the adoption agency because someone on her side of her family was interested in taking Alfie, which ended up causing a big headache for me with the social worker, not the adoption agency lady. The social worker ended up thinking that I was a Child Protective Services case because she said that I was wishy-washy on my emotions. Because when he was first born, I said I didn't want to see him right away. And because I wanted to give him up for adoption, she decided that meant that it was weird that I was interested in his medical decisions. She said she was worried that I was going to be too back and forth and too wishy-washy about keeping my son or not. I never once mentioned that I was keeping him. But again, it caused a lot of problems for me. But I did what my sister asked and I halted the process. She told me that she would be up that night, but she did have car trouble. She got stuck on a mountainside and it took her until the next day to reach me. That next day, Alfie was doing better overnight. The doctor was really optimistic. When he saw me the night before, he wasn't, but by the next day he was saying, I don't know what we did overnight, but he completely rallied and he was doing a lot better. He wasn't out of the woods. He was still critical, but he was responding to the meds and whatever therapy they were trying. When my sister got up there, she spent pretty much the entire day in the NICU, about maybe 20 minutes with me total. She became all about my son, pretty much acting like it was hers. She actually said something that we'll get into later that made me think that exactly. By this afternoon, I'm getting ready to be discharged, and I'm discharged around 7 p.m. By 10 o'clock, I'm being called back to the hospital because Alfie is dying. All right, we're here. I just got home from the hospital a few hours prior, and I'm being called by the doctor telling me I need to go back. I was sitting in my living room just about to take my first shower in a week. I was in the process of brushing up my hair, talking to my fiance, saying hi to my cats, finally being home, trying to comprehend what was going on, what just happened. And that doctor called me up and said, "You need to come be with your son." They wanted to talk to me about at least another type of drug therapy, or if I wanted to stop. So I called my sister and I told her, "You should call the doctor," because she had permission from me to have the doctor speak to her directly about Alfie's case. And after she called the doctor, she called me back and she said, "I'm on my way to get you. We're going." This part gets harder to talk about. So when we get to the hospital, we have a little bit of a walk before we get up to where he is. And in my chest, I already know I'm about to go say goodbye to him. There's something in you that just tells you it's about to happen. And when we got there, that's exactly what we ended up discussing and being told is the option. I reached a point where they told me they could do the drug therapy and what the options were. And after hearing that they had to do chest compressions on him because of everything that was failing, I personally couldn't take it anymore. I've been watching this little boy suffer and just go back and forth, up and down in his health. So I made the decision to stop all of his care. They unhooked him slowly from all the stuff he was on until there was just his breathing tube. And I got one more photo of him with the breathing tube, and it was the most I had seen of his face. And then they fully unhooked him. They wrapped him in a baby blanket and a little hat, and they gave him to me. And I sat there and I held my son for the first time as he was passing away. And he went to my sister for a couple minutes, and I asked for him back because I had this feeling. And I took him back, and he was gone. So we called in the doctor, and they double-checked his heart and told me Alfie was gone. That was exactly how he put it. After he passed, I just held him for a little while longer. They were talking to me about funeral decisions and helping me with all of it, and it just felt like time was not even moving. I just kept staring at his face and apologizing and told him how good of a job he did and how we know how hard he fought. And I told him something I had heard a long time ago, that if love was enough, he would still be here. They put together a care box for me with a few of his things and his footprints. I got a memorialized footprint made out of silver that the hospital commissioned through a company. And the nurses in the NICU, they took really good care of us, and I'll always be grateful to them for that. They also had a service that would help provide for him so that he wouldn't have to go to a morgue and wait for the funeral home. I don't know why that helped me, but it really helped me to know that he got to stay in his bed until they came and got him. I had him cremated. I picked him up a few days later. And in those few days, it felt like I was just ghosting through time. I did not understand how this week happened. Everything that I went through, everything that in the hospital, how I was treated, ignored, the pain, and I made it out the other side, and Alfie didn't. I don't know how you're expected to just go on with your life after something like that happens. But clearly I'm in uniform, and My makeup's on, my earrings are in, I'm back at my job. Yes, I have a GoFundMe. Yes, I am struggling. I'm not ashamed to be asking people for help, even you strangers on the internet. I'm not ashamed. I need help, and we're humans. I'm ashamed of what I went through. I'm ashamed that I didn't know. I appreciate everyone here telling me otherwise, but I can't believe it. I have more to tell you guys, so this story is not over, but this is the day that he died.